So our final presentation of the day is by Lolevia.
Oh, it works. I had just turned 15. I remember the days leading up to my birthday. I was terrified. I couldn't stop thinking about that cake. The cake that my family traditionally eats for birthday breakfasts. Most people, when they think of their birthday cake, they feel excited. But for me, it was my worst, dreaded nightmare. That morning, I woke up. It was still dark. My family still slept. This raging, relentless voice tore me out of bed. It forced me to pre-burn the calories of the cake I was supposed to eat that morning, pushing me through an excruciating 45-minute cardio hit calorie burn workout. Another burpee, another one, again. Hello, my name is Lolevia Trevers. My major work is titled, It Had a Voice, but I Have One Too, Inspiring Transformation in the World of Eating Disorders. This project weaves together research, art, and my own lived experience to bridge the gap between clinical understanding and the lived reality of eating disorders. To do this, I've created and published a graphic novel. I've written and printed an academic thesis, and I've run interactive workshops in middle and high schools. Now, before I go too far into my project, I'd like to give you guys a little bit of context and share my journey at this school and outside of it, as it has been rather unusual. I was born and raised in Central Australia, in a tiny town called Alice Springs. I grew up as a Steiner student, attending a small Steiner school that went up to year 8. I then joined this class for both year 9 and year 10 school trips. And the following year, I liked the school so much that I came and joined them for year 11. However, I was only here for the first 2 months, because after 2 months, I went off to Florence for what was supposed to be a 2-month exchange. Those 2 months quickly became 11 when I became one of 8 students to take part in a pioneering program called Strada Maestre. This is a full scholastic year that combines both study and hiking. And so from September 2024 to June 2025, we hiked the entire length of Italy. Now, while the other students, all Italian, focused and were guided through their individual school curriculums, I developed and focused on my major work, as well as learning their school curriculums. So why didn't I choose a topic like Italy, or hiking, or learning a new language, or learning outside of 4 walls? Why did I specifically choose to inspire transformation in the world of eating disorders? Well, truth is, this topic has been with me long before the hike even existed. But to understand why I chose this topic, I need to go back to where it began. When I was 13, I set out on the path and the pursuit of health. I was determined to be the best version of myself. And as I observed the world around me, I came to the conclusion that being happy means being healthy, and that being healthy means being skinny, and that being skinny means eating less and exercising more. So I did exactly that. I became first aware, then conscious, then obsessed about every piece of food I put into my mouth. Macros were counted, calories were counted, whole food groups were cut. The bad food list grew rapidly, and the good food list became a tiny collection of scrawny greens and dry chicken breast. And so what began as a pursuit of health became an obsession. I couldn't think my own thoughts anymore. It was like they'd been taken over by something else. There was this voice in my head that wasn't mine. Food, food, food. I couldn't stop thinking about food. The food I ate, the food I didn't, the food I burnt, the food I didn't. I became weak. I could no longer stand without being engulfed in blackness. The 45-minute cardio HIIT calorie burn workouts I had to do every single morning became my worst dreaded nightmare. My hands and my feet were chronically cold. Deep down, I knew there was something wrong with me, but I didn't know what, and neither did my family, nor the people around me. For 8 months, we went from one practitioner to another: kinesiology, naturopathy, the regular doctor. But the answers were always vague. I was being treated for severe anxiety and sleep deprivation. No one could pinpoint the real problem. Until finally, a doctor at Headspace called Dr. Sophie took my heart rate. The numbers were so alarmingly low that she left the room to get another machine, as she thought the first one must be broken. But when the second reading confirmed the exact same result, she called the hospital immediately. It was the 28th of April, 2022, exactly 1 month and 4 days after my 15th birthday. I was rushed to hospital and diagnosed with severe anorexia nervosa. I spent an entire 3 weeks there. It was excruciating to eat and not move, to do the exact opposite of everything my illness had always taught me to do. But those 3 weeks forced me to finally begin recovering my dreadfully depleted, starved body and mind. Later, I was told that I had been the person closest to death on that ward, and that my doctors were surprised I had survived. Unfortunately, I'm far from alone. Eating disorders are so much more common than we think. Eating disorders are severe mental health illnesses that affect how we think, feel, and behave around body, image, food, and self-worth. The 3 main types of eating disorders include anorexia nervosa, which is characterized by extreme food restriction and a massive fear of gaining weight. Bulimia nervosa, where someone binge eats and feels so guilty that they try everything to try get rid of it. And then binge eating disorder, where someone eats a large amount of food in a small amount of time, but they cannot control it. Every 52 minutes, someone dies as a direct result of an eating disorder. Eating disorders have the highest mortality rate of any mental health illness, with anorexia nervosa being the deadliest. Right now, as I speak, over 1.1 million Australians are struggling with an eating disorder. In fact, in Australia, the deaths of eating disorders are higher than the amount of people killed on roads in a year from accidents. 9% of the American population, which is 30 million people, will experience an eating disorder at some point in their lifetime. And the worst part is, these numbers are rising. The number of people affected by eating disorders has almost doubled in the last decade, rising from 3.4% to 7.8% of the global population. That's massive. And despite being so widespread and deadly, these illnesses have some of the worst recovery and relapse statistics. Up to 50% will relapse back into the illness. And more than half never fully recover. Current treatment focuses on restoring weight and returning eating behaviors back to normal. They completely overlook the very thing that drives and maintains the illness, the eating disorder voice. Now, when I say eating disorder voice, I don't just mean a metaphor or a poetic way of describing negative thoughts. I mean a real controlling presence in someone's mind. It's like there is another person in your head. This person tells you what you can and can't eat, tells you how much you must exercise. It tells you what you have to do to be good enough. It uses fear and shame as a weapon or a control mechanism. And even though it might feel separate, it takes over your entire identity. I identified with my eating disorder before I knew how to separate myself from it. It takes over your choices. It takes over your life. And when this voice is left untreated in treatment, relapse becomes almost inevitable. It's like putting a Band-Aid on a broken leg or fixing or patching a leak instead of actually fixing the broken pipe. And when 97% of people with anorexia nervosa report hearing this voice, but no treatment actually targets the voice, it becomes painfully clear why current treatment is failing. And all of this reveals a massive gap. A lack of early recognition, a lack of genuine understanding, a lack of awareness, a lack of treatment that targets the eating disorder voice, and a lack of space for lived experience within the system. And exactly this is where my major work lies. This is exactly why I've created my major work. To address the gap that almost cost me my life, and that continues to cost others their lives, their voices, and their futures. So, how did I do this? What did I actually do for my major work? The next clip is me in the Italian olive groves presenting my initial major work proposal, my original ideas. So I decided to create a graphic novel because I found that images can sometimes say more than 1,000 words. And to capture the complexity of an illness in words is almost impossible. But as I sat down, a week after this proposal presentation, I was like, I'm going to start. I soon realized I didn't really know what a graphic novel even was, let alone how to actually create one. And after a bit of research, everything became a lot clearer. It also became a lot clearer that it would be a hell of a lot of work. Now, as if creating a graphic story or novel isn't challenging enough, no one could have prepared me for how challenging it would be while hiking the entire length of Italy. And I guess that's why no one does it. I don't recommend it. Now, I've just hiked between 20 and 30 kilometers. Uphill, downhill, sun, rain, wind, you name it. My legs feel like jelly. We've just arrived at the place where we'll be staying tonight. It's always different. It could be a church, a monastery, the stage of a theatre, or even underneath school desks. First, I take a shower because I stink. Now, these showers often lasted less than a minute because either there was 11 other people waiting to have a shower, or all the hot water had been used, which happened way too many times. Then I would go and grab my notebook. I had to be really careful about which paper I took because each piece of paper weighed something that I had to carry on my back. I would then go for my daily quest to find a table. Now, when you're drawing at home and you want to draw, you're going to go to your desk or your dining table. I went to see if there even was a table. I would be lucky if I found a table. I would be even more lucky if I found a table, a chair, and a light. I wasn't always lucky. Often I ended up looking something like this, with a head torch on the ground, and it was cold. Now, I began my graphic story by breaking my experience and my past into the main events. Then I would break those events into pages, and then those pages into what is called a panel. So here, this is a full page, and these are little thumbnails, so tiny drawings that only I could, I was lucky if I could actually tell what I drew the day before. And then these are like panels, so different parts of the page. Then came the part where I had to transform these experiences into black lines on white paper. This proved to be really hard. I was spending hours staring at a blank page with ideas dancing across it, or blankly staring at the page. There was nothing at all. To share a bit of what this was like, I'm going to read an excerpt of my journey journal for my major work. Sketching my graphic novel has been incredibly challenging, emotionally and mentally. The art part is hard because it has to come from me. I love art, and I'm not horrible at it, but I've always worked from references, from photos, from tutorials, or from other artists. I'm terrified of drawing freely from my own imagination. Every time I try, I freeze. My mind goes blank. But this project demands that I draw from my own experience, from images I've carried in my mind throughout my eating disorder, and bring them to life on the page. And that's terrifying, because I'm reliving my own past. I've been trying to feel and visualize what it felt like to suffocate in the claws of anorexia nervosa. And it's ugly. The creature I've been sketching genuinely scares me. It looks like something from a horror film. Because it was. Now, in my graphic story, I've portrayed the eating disorder voice, or drawn it, as a rat. Here's a little rat, or at first it's a mouse, but it grows into a rat and then eventually a monster. But why a rat? Why a scrawny little furry creature that lives in your pantry? Well, I hope not. But why did I choose a rat? Well, it actually started while I was journaling in hospital. I had recognized rules and thought patterns that weren't really mine. And so I wrote them down. And the first thing that came to mind was an evil rat. I don't actually know why. But I looked it up straight away, evil rat. And this right here is the first image that came up. And instantly I knew that was it. That was what was in my mind. That was what had possessed me and was controlling me. The next clip is of me explaining how the rat works a few days after I had discovered it. So naturally, this rat became the voice and became the way I showed the eating disorder. Now, another thing I really struggled with was drawing myself. Now, our human brains know human proportions so well that if I draw a nose a bit crooked or a finger a bit bigger, it's like blatantly obvious. And how was I supposed to draw myself or a character of myself over and over and over and over and over and over and make it look somewhat the same? It was driving me nuts. And so that's when I came across reference photos. I would pose images or facial expressions or postures I had in mind and then use those photos to help me capture the images and use them as reference to then help me draw. For example, here, this is an image of me putting my hand up because that's what I wanted to draw, but I didn't know how to draw it. And then I used that photo to help me draw this image. Same goes here. I wanted to draw this feeling. I had this image in my mind. And so I took a photo of me feeling that feeling, and that helped me then draw this picture. Same with this one. This is my Italian teacher, Roberta, after I told her to reach for someone like they're dying. And this is, I think this is the day before my 18th birthday. I think I was still in my sweaty clothes from my hike on some crusty floor that we were going to sleep that night. And those pictures then became the inspiration and the thing I worked off to create this page. Now, as I arrived in Rome, is my mic? Yeah. Now, as I arrived in Rome, I got to meet my art mentor, Maria Giulia. I got to spend a whole weekend with her and have like a mini art intensive before we continued on our hike. This is where I brought my first page to life. We used one of my already previously finished sketches. I scanned it into my tablet, and then using an application, I went over it with like a pen and created a clean PDF on my tablet. Then after a delicious lunch, pizza, of course, we went to her local print shop and got that printed on watercolor paper. And then I got to bring color to the page. Finally, after months and months and months of black and white, sketching, I got to bring watercolor to the page. And like I mentioned earlier, watercolor has been a massive part of my own healing journey from this illness. The next clip is me painting in hospital, as this is kind of where it all began, and this is where I discovered art in the first place.
I'm still in hospital, as you can see, which is, I think it's like 2 weeks and a bit now. It's been a time where I can find my creative side. I've been painting, crocheting.
Olivia is doing this with
Pass me my water.
bag paintbrush that she's using one hair up, but look at the fine detail. So it's all layered, but some of the finished products, like this. So she's been creating a whole art gallery here.
Yeah, on my window.
Some of those drawings or paintings, watercolor paintings, that you just saw in that video are actually one of my main pages in my graphic story. So if you have a look afterwards, you can see a whole spread of all of the paintings that I've merged into a dreamy landscape. Now, that painting or that page that I did in Rome was the first of 21 pages that I finished. Creating this graphic story has been messy, and what I thought would take me 1 month took me 9 months. And finally, on the 17th of July, I got my first pre-copy printed. Holding the book in my hands was a moment I will never forget. I first got 20 copies printed. They sold. I went back to the print shop to get another 20 copies printed. They sold 2. I was completely overwhelmed. It wasn't even finished yet. I had people asking me to gift these books to their loved ones that they knew were struggling. I had doctors, dietitians, and psychologists asking me to use my book in their practice for communication. I had schools buying bulk orders for their school curriculums or their school libraries. And it wasn't long before the bookshop of Alice Springs asked me to launch my book. I didn't actually know what a book launch was before I did one. I had no idea. The 45 tickets sold rapidly, and on the 11th of October, I was standing in front of a 65 or more people audience, crammed into this tiny bookshop, most of them standing because there was only 45 chairs. I had my incredible mentor, Grace Dwyer, help me launch my book. Grace Dwyer coordinates eating disorder programs in the Northern Territory and has been the perfect mentor for this major work. Now, after my book launch, there was this line of people waiting for me to sign my own book. I never in my wildest dreams thought that would happen to me, but it took me by surprise. But the thing that touched me the most was the feedback that I was getting. My phone exploded with messages of people who were deeply touched by my book. And to give you guys an idea of what I was receiving, I'm going to play an audio recording that was sent to my mother after one of her friends had read my book.
Oh my goodness, that just brought me to tears with waves of goosebumps and so powerful. I certainly haven't experienced the depth and pain of anorexia, but I can certainly relate to the feeling of a little rat or this voice controlling what I do and how I feel in relation to my body, like so many of my dear sisters, and it's so sad. And I'm so moved by your beautiful daughter's story and book, and I'm so grateful that you shared it with me. I'm gonna share it with some friends that probably need to hear it, especially one right now who is giving herself a really hard time in relation to all of that. So thank you, Cedar. Thank you, Lolevia.
Now, moving on to the next component of my major work, I'd like to talk about the interactive workshops that I've been running in middle and high schools. In fact, some of you probably in the audience have experienced some of these workshops. These workshops are at the heart of my project. they have the impact and the outreach that I set out to have with my major work. My main goal is to spread and raise awareness and to build compassion around eating disorders in young people and in teachers. In fact, hundreds of studies show and prove that school-based education is one of the most effective ways we can actually prevent these illnesses from developing in the first place. But on a more deeper and personal level, I walk into these classrooms because I wish I had someone like me walk into my classroom when I was 13. I wish I had someone share their story to help me realize that what I was going through wasn't healthy. And so I walk into these classrooms not as a doctor or a psychologist or a teacher or a lecturer. I walk into these classrooms as someone who once needed this, as someone who now carries the story to tell and the tools to share. Now, with younger classes, we focus on body image, self-esteem, and the impact of social media on our well-being and our mental health. With older classes, we go deeper into understanding what eating disorders are, how they develop, why they develop, but most importantly, how we can recognize them and what we can do when we recognize them. Now, one of my favorite games I play across all classrooms is called the myth-busting game. And instead of explaining it, I'm going to invite you guys to give it a shot. It's not hard. Well, maybe I made it a little tricky. Now, I'm going to ask you guys in a second to close your eyes, and then I'm going to read out a myth. If you think it's true, I want you to stand up. If you think it's false, I want you to stay sitting. True, stand up. False, stay sitting. Then you can open your eyes, have a look what everyone else has said or gestured, and then I'm going to read out a brief answer to the myth. Now, this isn't about getting it right or getting it wrong. It's just about challenging what we know. All right, let's give it a shot. I want everyone in the room to close their eyes. Everyone. Only girls get eating disorders. True or false? Awesome, you can have a look. It is false. The truth is that 1 in 4 people with anorexia or bulimia nervosa are male. 25% are male. All right, closing our eyes once more. Binge eating disorder is the most common eating disorder. True or false? Yeah, stand up if it's true, stay seated if it's false. All right, you can open your eyes and have a look. This is actually a really tricky one that I put in there. The truth is that there are more people with binge eating disorder than anorexia nervosa and bulimia nervosa combined. Yeah. Okay, sitting down. Last one. You can tell someone has an eating disorder just by looking at them. True or false? All right, we can open our eyes. It's false. I mean, when I was at my worst, you could definitely see it physically. All the practitioners that we went to, you could see it. But at that stage, it was already way too late. We can't really tell just by looking at someone physically what is going on inside them. And these illnesses are so much more than physical. They are so much more in the mental. I have done these workshops across about 10 different classrooms now, and each time I leave the classroom feeling incredibly fulfilled and with a massive smile on my face, because it means so much to me. Now, moving on to the next component of my major work, my thesis. Now, one of my main goals was to bridge this gap between clinical understanding and the lived reality of eating disorders. I had my graphic novel for my outreach and my impact, and I had my graphic novel to share my story, and I had these workshops that I was running for the outreach and the impact. But there was still something missing. This piece that connected my experience to the broader understanding of research. And so, I wrote a thesis. Now, I had no idea what a thesis was before I said I would create one or write one. And so, like any person would do, I went to Professor Google and asked Google, "Hey Google, what is a thesis?" I was in utter gobsmack and shock when I read what Professor Google had to say. A Google hat. It's very important. Professors wear glasses, apparently. A thesis is not merely a long essay. It is an original, rigorously researched contribution to the human knowledge that demonstrates your capacity to think at a scholarly, professional level. To identify gaps in existing understanding, synthesize vast bodies of understanding and literature, construct and defend a precise research question, and produce an evidence-based argument that withstands expert scrutiny. Me? Write something like that? I hadn't even written a formal essay in my life before. But that didn't stop me from committing 100%. And after I understood what a thesis even was, I began teaching myself everything I needed to know to create one. How to build an argument, craft a thesis statement, structure chapters, and synthesize information and literature, and how to properly reference academic resources. I didn't actually know what all of that meant before I taught myself. So don't worry if you have no idea what that is. Now, my thesis, at its core, argues that identifying first, recognizing the eating disorder voice, and then separating yourself from the eating disorder and seeing it as separate is the missing piece, or might be the missing piece to recovery and treatment. I truly believe that identifying it and separating oneself can truly improve recovery outcomes. Now, to show you guys a bit of the process, what the process looked like of writing the thesis, this is what follows. Studying, writing, freaking out, writing, freaking out, writing, sleeping, writing, going crazy. I'm done. Guys, I give up. Let's go. I've got this. Nah, bro. I'm out. Writing, and nope. Mentally breaking down, sleeping, more sleeping, not sleeping, but should be, until finally, after 7 excruciating months, but also really fulfilling months because I loved writing this thesis, I welcomed this thesis to the world. 57,000 words, 220 pages, so many tears and sleepless nights, and I had done it. Another moment I will never forget. You can pick the weight of the paper. It's like, Now, this major work has been one of the most exciting, fulfilling, terrifying, and exhausting journeys I've ever been on. It was 100 times harder than hiking the full length of Italy. I came across many obstacles. There were these massive brick walls of writer's block where my blinking cursor would hover and blink on a white page, or my pencil would hover again above a blank canvas. The pressure I put on myself was suffocating. I was so insecure of not walking the traditional high school pathway that this major work became my only chance to prove I was capable. I compared myself to this perfect student in my mind, and I always felt small and a failure and academically behind. Along with that came perfectionism. Nothing was ever good enough. It was like tying my shoelaces with tweezers every step that I took. And if the knot wasn't flawless, I would tear it apart and start again. Now, this perfectionism didn't just affect my creativity, but it also really affected my mood and my self-worth. And together with the exhaustion, the physical exhaustion of the hike, this pressure and this perfectionism created this gaping hole of depression. For a month, I had to leave my hike in Italy and go to a family friend's in Germany, where I could barely get out of bed in the morning and where I would cry myself to sleep almost every night, if I got to sleep. I often found myself stranded on this island of loneliness. This school, my teachers, and my classmates were so far away that I had no one to share my experience with, no one to relate to, no one to understand me. And in Italy, no one understood what I was going through because one, there was the language barrier. I was still only learning Italian, and this project had so many fancy words that I didn't know how to say. And two, no one understood what a major work was. It wasn't a Steiner-based education, so I was alone in this, or felt alone. But having said that, I came out of this depression way stronger and way happier than I was when I went in. And I've learnt ways to deal with these challenges. Now, these challenges, these obstacles, every gaping hole of depression, every painstakingly tied shoelace, every massive brick wall, taught me more than any teacher ever taught me. The project has opened doors I didn't even know existed and presented me with opportunities to grow in ways I couldn't even have imagined. I learned how to organize myself and my time. I learned how to set my own goal and find my own way there. I learned independence and self-discipline. And through writing my thesis, I learned how to learn. I now understand how to absorb information, how to craft it, and how to weave it into my own work. I practically completely relearned how to learn and how to read and write. Through writing my thesis, I also learned how to clearly articulate myself through sentences and paragraphs and chapters of purpose. And if anything has taught me how to face intense fear and anxiety and stress, it has been this major work. I've learned that even just 5 minutes of breathing can actually really help me find my footing again. And I use that technique a lot while writing my thesis, just breathing. Now, beyond academic growth and self-discipline, this journey has been a deeply personal one. It has allowed me to learn not only from myself, but about myself. I spent an extraordinary amount of time in my own company, understanding my strengths and my capabilities, as well as my limits and my weaknesses. It has allowed me to view my past and what happened through my illness through a different lens. And I now understand what happened, why it happened, and how it happened. It has required me to dig deeply into myself. And it's been painful and it's been rough, but it has taught me the art of self-reflection. Now, one of the main lessons that I've learned from this major work is the simple step by step. A beautiful quote that really captures this is by Lao Tzu. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with one single step. The only way I ever made it up any mountain, whether it was a massive climb in Italy or a new chapter in my thesis, was by putting one foot in front of the other. And looking back, it wasn't about the finished products that I've created, the graphic story, the thesis, the workshops that I've run. It is so much about the process that I went on to create these. It's also, I found, not about getting to the top of that mountain. Because look, there's always going to be another mountain. It's about enjoying the journey that you take up that mountain. It's about stopping and looking at the landscape. It's about feeling the sun soak into your skin. Now, this major work has existed within me, and I came across this quote that really captured how I felt towards this major work. The sculpture is already complete within the marble block before I start my work. It is already there. I just have to chisel away the superfluous material. By Michelangelo. This major work was already in the marble. All I had to do was carve it out. So many people told me to do less, or that I was exaggerating or being too high achiever. But they didn't understand. I couldn't just walk away with half my major work still buried in the stone. And even though picking up that hammer and that chisel was extremely hard, tiring and exhausting, it was so fulfilling and it was so worth it. Every struggle, every strike with that hammer I made was worth it. Now, I wouldn't have done this project and been able to do this project without a few incredible people. First and foremost, I would like to thank my incredible mentor, Gillian Rogers. She has been my mentor, my supervisor, my editor, my everything for this project. And no matter where I was, if I was in Italy or Australia, she has been that person that has guided me and offered me unwavering support at every step of the process. Whenever I sent in a draft, within 30 minutes she had it completely edited, like incredible feedback, and yeah, I wouldn't have, it's just incredible woman. And I feel completely honored that she could be here today, because I actually haven't seen her for the entire length of my major work. So thank you, Gillian, thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for being that incredible mentor that I wouldn't have been able to do this project without. Next, I would like to thank my family. You guys have been and offered me the unwavering love and support I needed to get through this project. My dad, my sisters, my grandma, and especially my mum for always being that shoulder I could cry on, whatever time of the night or morning it was, even if it was over the phone. Maria Colace, who helped me bring this book to life, The Art. Grace Dwyer, who was my mentor in the eating disorder realm of things. Roberta Cortella and everyone from the hike who tried to keep me somewhat sane. Anya and Jeremy Big, who didn't batter an eyelid every time I came back to their print shop to ask for more copies of if it was another graphic story or if it was my thesis or a journey journal. They're like, there's another book. Jess Aikens for offering me that support when everything became a little or way too much overwhelming. Tony for, no matter how stressed I was, would say, it's all right, Liv, have a cup of tea. And also a massive thanks to the school for actually supporting my really unique and individual high school pathway. And you guys, like Lorian, has really just given me that freedom and trusted in me to go on this extravagant, strange pathway. So thank you, Lorian, for that. That's been very, very special. And also to my class, both here and in Italy, for just offering me support and putting up with me. So thank you so much, my class and everyone else. But I'm not finished. Don't clap yet. Now, before I let you guys go to lunch, I know you're hungry, I want to offer you and share with you one of the most valuable lessons I've learnt throughout this major work. Now, this voice that I've been talking about, this harsh inner critic, this eating disorder voice, isn't exclusive to eating disorders. And the truth is that each one of us in this room knows what it's like to have an inner critic. That voice or that thought that tells you, oh, I could have been better. I'm not good enough. I should have done that better. Oh, that doesn't look good. I should have been a better parent or teacher or student. We've all heard this in ourselves. And now I want you guys, I'm going to give you guys a couple of seconds to think of one thing this week or in the last few days that you've heard this kind of self-talk, this inner critic. Just one thing. It can be short, tiny. Now I want everyone to close your eyes. Everyone. I want you to imagine a tiny miniature you sitting on your left shoulder. This you is surrounded in this golden, warm bubble of light. This is your compassionate, inner, kind self. Now this compassionate voice on your left shoulder tells you one sentence. It can be anything, something kind that the mini you has to say to you. Take a breath, relax, and think and listen to this tiny little voice on your shoulder. I want you to hold on to that. This is, you can open your eyes now. This is your compassionate inner voice. And we all have the capability to strengthen this voice whenever our inner critic tells us something or just in everyday life. So don't forget it. Thank you.